What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Couple Things Interviews.
With Shawn and Andrew.
Today we have a fun one that Andrew just jumped right in on. Dr. Morgan Cutlip.
Honestly, I'm confused. I thought we were all on the same page.
I was impressed, and I was also like, wow.
I really enjoy this interview. Dr. Morgan has a great personality. She's
Amazing.
a bunch of fun and also has some really good things to say. I do want to preface this by saying I had some revelations through this all, but it was things I'd thought about before, don't get me wrong, just heard in a new way. And I think that's what she does well in her book, A Better Share.
Let me just say, ladies, if you have an evening or a time where it's just you and your husband, and you can put this episode on in the background, do it. Because I literally was like, I owe you, doctor. Because the amount of stuff she revealed to you was amazing.
So ultimately it comes down to this. What was revealed was the importance of the mutual feeling that there is a fair share of workload distributed between the couple and a feeling actually being founded on a fair share of workload.
She goes to explain in depth mental load when it comes to women versus men. This is all stemmed from her new book, which is A Better Share, How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex.
That's right.
It was a phenomenal interview and one I really think you guys are going to enjoy.
Ultimately, at the end of this, I feel like a emotional white belt, emotional rookie, and all you females are like emotional black belts.
I think you went up a level, though.
I think I learned a little bit.
We will link down below all the information to A Better Share by Dr. Morgan Cutlip. Highly, highly recommend reading it.
Well, I love listening to you guys.
Oh, thank you.
I've listened to quite a few episodes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you guys are great.
Curious what you think as a professional.
I think you're doing so much right.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And just your mindsets about your relationship.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Morgan Cutlip.
Thanks for having me. I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We're going to talk about sex today.
Oh.
Is that
wow.
Is that right?
You did not. There was no warm up for that.
He didn't warm me. Yeah.
Is that symbolic?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Oh, I'm uncomfortable already. All right.
If only you knew how out of character that was.
Oh my gosh. I'd love to hear about your background. We'll get to the sex, but I want to hear about your background and why your perspective on this topic is unique. How did you come to write a book about this topic?
Well, this book comes out of my own experience. It's the book that I needed when my husband and I had a family. So I have two books. One book is for moms, and that's the book that I needed as I transitioned into motherhood. And just, goodness, with all my education, all my knowledge, all of my background, I was completely blindsided by how much motherhood really affected me. Felt totally buried by it. And then the second piece that I really couldn't believe was how quickly I developed irritation and resentment toward my husband after kids. And it was almost like this experience of, gosh, did my life change? And his kind of stayed the same. And so I think a lot of that had to do with the differences in responsibilities, who was doing what. At the time, he had, we were living in Florida for not even a year. And he got a job change and moved to California. So our daughter's name is Effie. When she was born, those first 8 months, he was in California and I was in Florida. So it changed our experience for sure. But we had a great relationship. We do now. And I was like, man, you bug me a lot. I'm so overwhelmed. I feel on edge. And I think a lot of it had to do with just this disproportionate way we handled home and family life. And then it just started coming up more and more in conversation. I started seeing it on social media, and I was like, we have to have a new way to navigate this time because modern family life is so relentless.
Andrew talks a lot about how different it is, and I even agree, being married to someone who's not a mom and being married to someone who's a mom. Me before having kids was a completely different person than me after having kids. And the mental load that happens after you have kids as a mom, do you think that changes a person? And so you have to go through a transition process of getting used to the new you?
Yeah, I think you have to get used to the new you, and then your partner has to make adjustments for the new you. It sort of can go to an extreme where I think the new you can become super uptight, super anxious. The less your partner jumps in, the more you have to sort of like over exaggerate some of these just like felt responsibilities to kind of make up that gap. I think the change is so rapid because it almost literally happens overnight when you have a kid.
It
So you're
does.
like, I was good before, and then the next day I wake up and I'm responsible forever for keeping this person alive, all the responsibilities that come with them, all the anxieties and the worries, and so it changes rapidly. Couples aren't usually prepared for that. What I see that happens a lot too is like usually the guy notices this shift in their partner and they don't know what to do with it. And maybe it's kind of scary. And so they sort of create a little distance. And then that distance becomes more frustrating to their partner. And then we start this sort of pattern that ends up creating some pretty big issues for a lot of couples.
I feel like that was something we have talked a lot about after having 3 babies, which is there are so many resources and so many people who prepare you for having a kid. Literally, like, prepare you for leading up to the day you have a child. And then as soon as you have that kid, they're like, oh yeah, you did it. You crossed the finish line. Now it's all like, just go off and raise them now. And I remember some of our biggest frustrations came with like the dynamic of us after kids.
Yeah.
And it got a little longer with each kid. It took a little bit more time to like get back to us.
Yeah.
I remember feeling like nobody ever talked about what happens to mom and dad.
No. Nobody prepares your relationship for that. But if you look at the research, I mean, it's been probably a while since they've looked at this because every time they looked at it, they found the same thing, which is that after kids, your relationship satisfaction drops. Other things change, like your like joy you find in life and meaning in life, like that stuff shifts to the positive direction. But it's a normal experience that couples are not prepared for. And then men and women experience it differently. So men usually have this drop in satisfaction because they feel an increased pressure to provide and because the sex life changes. So that's kind of where that lives. And then for women, it's the loss of freedom, which is one that hit me real hard. I don't know about you, but I was like, I cannot go to the bathroom without bringing contraptions in with me. And then the other is the increase in responsibilities. So we experience it differently, but it's like just knowing that would be helpful going into having kids. And like, let's talk about how we're going to navigate this stuff. But
that drop in satisfaction is temporary, right? Does not
Temporary.
it ultimately supersedes those without children? Do I have that right?
Yes, it does. So it's like those first, like I think it's 3 to 4 years,
Yeah.
there's this drop and then it comes back. I just think what we have to be careful of is that sometimes that drop in satisfaction sort of shifts the bar of what we think of as our new normal. So there are some couples who become disconnected during that time, which is normal, but then they never actually repair. And then during that time of disconnection, they create a lot of hurts that end up sort of lasting the rest of the relationship. And it sends them off on this trajectory that ends up doing a lot of damage. And these are the couples where many, many years down the line, you know, the kids are grown and they're like, I don't know, we just grew apart. You know, it's like, well, there may be some small things early on that started that pattern.
So do you approach the data point with your mind set on, okay, I just have to get through 3 or 4 years? Or do you actually have to actively work those 3 or 4 years? You're not just like waiting for the calendar to change.
Right. I think you have to be proactive.
Yeah.
I think you have to have a plan. I think couples need a plan for after kids because it's like before kids, everything unexpected is like fun. You're like, oh, we're going to build a house. That'll be exciting. Or, oh, we have this work move. That's an adventure. You know, everything is exciting and fun and just something you do together and create new experiences. But after kids, all of that stuff becomes stressors because there's way more involved. And I think we have to have a plan for couples after kids enter the picture.
I feel like one theme of the book is this ability to be playful almost. And why is that important? It's actually a core value of ours, but why is that an underlying or important tenet to work through this?
I know it sounds cliche, but a lot of couples don't do this, which is to keep fun in your relationship. And the reason why it's so important is because we start to just get in sort of like the logistical monotony of life after kids, where we're just like uploading and downloading information to each other, but we're not actually remembering why we fell in love, why we chose this person and enjoying each other. And so it keeps the relationship fresh, keeps you remembering that you love the person that you chose. And I think too, it adds new experiences. So you have stuff to talk about. Like I was on Netflix last night and there's this comedian. I won't say their name because it's embarrassing, but my husband and I love comedians and it's like a new special. And I texted my husband, I'm like, new special, do not watch it without me. And he's like, as if I ever would, but it's like, now we'll have inside jokes that we'll share, that we'll talk about. And I think a lot of times people, when they've been married for a while, they sort of feel like, I already know everything there is to know about you. But knowing has this like never ending horizon point because each day we have new experiences. And so this just gives you more shared experiences to talk about.
That's really well said. And I think now that I am reflecting on this, being playful almost shows that you have almost like an added way to navigate reality. It's like there's always the stuff that happens to you or happens in the day to day, but are you able to be a little bit detached from that and move around through all that stuff more loosely and like with more fun perspective and
yeah,
in a
like
lot
some
of ways.
humor.
Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of studies on humor in relationships, and it's so beneficial.
Right.
Like we got to joke about stuff, and like life with kids is bananas. So we have to be able to laugh at this stuff. Like one of my favorite moments with my husband is like when the kids will be, I don't know, like kind of annoying, and we'll be across the room from each other, and we'll make eye contact, and we'll just be like, it's like we're on the same team. We're connected, we're aligned, and like that just feels good, especially in this hectic time in life.
So for anybody listening, if they were to find themselves in that, say, 3 to 4 year period where they haven't actively been working on their relationship, they find themselves distancing from each other, growing resentment, feeling like, they're just not together anymore. How can they turn that around? And like, what would be step one?
Oof. $1 million question. Step one, so I have like my mind works in like a million ways. So it's hard for me to choose a step one. So I'll give you one, but I can give you a couple. But one would be to start expressing more gratitude. And this is really hard because people don't like to give until they get in relationships, and they get sort of in these standoffs where it's like, well, you're not doing this, so I'm not going to give to that. So relationships require a lot of humility.
Yeah.
But when you step into gratitude and appreciation, it will immediately shift the tone in your relationship. And so that's like a nice way to kind of like disrupt that pattern and start to shift toward a better place. It kind of like opens the door for more positive interaction. So that's one place I would start. Another is like a bigger picture type of thing, which is that I think couples need to start incorporating regular meetings. I think you guys have talked about this, like the business meeting in our relationships. But it is like one of the best tools you can incorporate into your family life. And if a couple is in a bad spot, this first meeting can be kind of scary because you're like, are you just going to gripe about everything? So I think the first meeting, let's say in your bad spot, the first meeting would really be about sort of just like assessing where we're at and dreaming up where we want to be. So don't get into the nitty gritty. Don't get into all the things you're upset about or that are bugging you. But let's talk about, we're here right now. This is not where we want to be, not happy. Where do we want to be in this time next year? And then let's come up with 2 to 3 things we can start to do differently together as a couple to try to work toward getting there. So keep it kind of big picture is another place that I would start that make a big difference. And then schedule your next meeting. And continue to touch base.
What are some of the mistakes that you see when they're on different sides trying to come back together? What are some of the mistakes?
One is that they try to win. I remember at our wedding, my husband and I are really competitive, and I'm sure you guys cannot relate to that.
Not at all.
And that was like our whole wedding ceremony was like about how we'll have to put our competition aside. And it's true. We really had to work hard at that. And I think a lot of times when couples are making mistakes, it's like they're viewing each other as the enemy. They're villainizing their partner. They're stuck in a bad attitude, and they just want to have that sort of like all their gripes validated. And instead, we have to start to externalize some of these issues and realize that you and your partner are supposed to be aligned on the same team and navigating some of these difficulties together. So instead of trying to win, I think we really need to work on addressing the actual issue and externalize that so we can think about what are some ways together we can navigate some of these frustrations and hardships.
I love the conversation that you painted and laid out for that first meeting. It's such a fine line though, because marriage is contractual to a certain degree, right? And like
It
to
is
have
to a total degree.
It is.
yeah.
It is It is a contract.
But I've realized that when you really are dead set on like these is XYZ is what you need to do, and these are the chores and the tasks and this, and you didn't do this and you didn't do that, and I'm supposed to do XYZ, and I think that's really good and necessary to have those relationship roles. But I think a side effect of that can be losing the flexibility or the understanding or like the team aspect of it, and it becomes more of a legalistic type. You're not holding up your side of the bargain when there is maybe a little more grace or charity involved in like, especially in a marriage, unlike any other relationship, it's like, hey, I'm here for you, you know? How do you balance those two things where it's like, you need to explicitly state this, but also know that I'm here for you if you need anything.
So balancing the rigidity versus the flexibility.
Yes.
This is actually why I think meetings are really helpful, because they're a structure, but within the structure you can be flexible. And if you have relationship rules set, which I mean, probably more couples would benefit from doing that. I don't think a lot of couples set up their relationship rules, but if you have some set, when you come to this meeting, you can sort of renegotiate. Like, are these working for us anymore? Like, is it working that you're supposed to get up in the morning with the kids and I don't, or should we swap that? Like, so that meeting provides an opportunity to reevaluate and revisit some of the ways that you're operating as a family and as a couple. And I think that it's nice to have a forum for that, because what I find when I talk, especially with women, is that a lot of times when they initiate a conversation about the relationship, and usually it's women who are initiating the relationship conversations. I know there's exceptions, but usually they end up working up a whole lot of courage and energy to do it, because a lot of times their partners don't tolerate it well. So it helps to avoid some of this like bottling everything up and then blowing up or developing these deep resentments, because you have a regular place to touch base, share the responsibility of the relationship. The other piece is a lot of women will feel like, why am I the only one who cares about our relationship? Why am I the one who's like talking about date nights, doing these things? So I think that meeting sort of like helps to eliminate some of the rigidity or reassess it. You can make adjustments.
That's really good. We get asked all the time, like, hey, do you ever think like you guys are too structured, too rigid, too scheduled out, and it takes away like the whimsy of life, you know, like this whimsical spontaneity or like the romance that we all like to think just like happens. And it's like, well, I know myself well enough that I'm totally irresponsible with my time if I have if I have no boundaries on it. You know what I'm saying? So the meeting, from my standpoint, us having these structured times, we call them monthly checkups for like when we come together and say, hey, this is a pattern I've seen that I would like to change. Or the weekly schedule meetings, which are my least favorite. They're my least favorite, but
you've gotten so much better at them.
I think we have a long way to go, but Shawn was good in taking the courage and having the courage to want to establish those. And I think I'm more good at like, hey, well, it's on the schedule. Like I'm like, let's do it. But not when you have it planned and everyone's expecting it to happen, it's way more easy to just, hey, we have a meeting and this is what we do. And it's not like a emotionally charged thing. Like, whoa, what do you want a meeting about? Like, what did I do wrong? Or it's just like, no, this is what we do. And maybe there's something that needs to be talked about, maybe not, but it's there, you know?
Yeah, so. I feel like that's one of the main benefits is that like when you have this on the books, then and you do it repeatedly, it sort of like takes the heat out of having these conversations where they're not charged anymore, because you get so used to it. And then I think that usually there's one partner who's more on edge about how things are going in the family and in the relationship. And so it takes out some of their anxiety knowing that these things are scheduled. And it's like with kids, you know, with kids, we've learned that when they have boundaries, they feel more secure and they feel safer. And probably having meetings like this with a little bit of structure provides enough safety and security to then lean into more whimsy and flexibility and spontaneity in other ways, because like that box is checked, it's handled.
I was actually going to say exactly that. Like when we started implementing more boundaries within our relationship, it's like we know date night is every Thursday. And some people will say, well, you don't have as much freedom to be, impulsive or adventurous or whatever. But it's like, since we know that, we find ways with each date night to have adventure and to have spontaneity and to have whimsy and to have like these moments. So it's almost allowed us to have more.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that's nitpicking.
Yeah.
Like these people are, because it's like, a lot of people don't even get a weekly date night.
I know.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so you have one that's scheduled. I mean, it's kind of like people say this about sex too, about scheduling sex. They're like, that just takes the fun out of it. And I'm like, not really, because then you have all day to sort of like be thinking about it and getting in the mood for it and thinking, all of that stuff. And so I think that there are benefits to having some structure.
You talk about the 5 questions, the 5 important questions that that go along with intimacy and the conversations that you should have to kick up your intimacy.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what those are?
Oh gosh. Well, they all require like a little explanation.
Yes.
So let's just do like maybe 1 or 2.
Great.
So I don't take over.
Great.
Check out the book if you want to read them all.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of them is exploring your desire. And a lot of couples don't really understand how desire works. A lot of people don't. And that's just kind of normal to not understand it. So I can explain Desire 101. So desire is a 2-part system. And the easiest way to explain it is that we have an accelerator and we have a brake. So accelerator is like what turns you on. Brake is what turns you off. And then they operate separately. Okay. And you can have different levels of sensitivity for each. So somebody might have a really sensitive accelerator and it's like a cool breeze turns them on. And they have like a very like unsensitive brake. So nothing really turns them off. Somebody might have a really sensitive accelerator, but also a sensitive brake. So you sort of have to like kind of understand where you fall. And for the most part for women, the brake will override the accelerator. So if you start to like kind of think about this as how it applies to you, you can start to think about things that like turn you on. And by the way, like I'm not just talking about stuff in the bedroom. For the most part, like some of my biggest turn-ons like happen outside the bedroom. And I think that's where sex starts outside the bedroom. So you think about what turns me on, but then what turns me off. So that's why it's part of my book on the mental load is for a lot of people, a full brain crowds out any opportunity to get in the mood for sex because it's occupied with other things. Or if you come to your partner and you're like, I got to talk to you, I'm overwhelmed. And they're like, it's going to be okay. And they kind of like dismiss it. And you're like, oh, that's not what I need. That can shut down desire. So we have to sort of expand our definition of it. But then also couples need to talk about this stuff because I think we get this narrow view on sex where it's basically like, what does it for you in the bedroom? But it's like, no, we need to talk about the dynamics outside of the bedroom that are killing desire. Like a lot of women after kids are like, I just can't find it anymore. And there's a physical and a physiological component to that. But also, we're super overwhelmed. We're super busy. And for a woman to be turned on, her brain has to be turned off. And so we really need to talk about these things as a couple so we can maximize all the things that hit the accelerator and minimize everything that hits the brake.
Jumping back to explain a little bit of what you're saying, can you explain mental load?
Yes.
Because we've even talked about this, how like it's taking over social media at the moment. People trying to explain the woman's mental load or the mother's mental load and the differences between like a mother's mental load versus a father's or a man's.
This is a long answer.
I know.
I'm sorry. I don't even be like, does she stop talking?
No.
Okay.
This is why we brought you on. We want to know all of this.
Okay. So the 30,000 foot definition is that the mental load is the seemingly never-ending running to-do list that we carry around in our heads. It has 2 key components. Most of the stuff involved in it is invisible, which makes it hard to explain to somebody else, which makes it hard to outsource, and also it's hard to get appreciation around. The second piece is it takes up cognitive real estate. So that's kind of what I was talking about. Like it crowds out energy and space and room for other things like peace, presence, patience, regulating your emotions, getting in the mood for sex. Everybody has a mental load. I remember my husband and I, in the beginning when we talked about this, he's like, well, see my mental load. And we'd be like, now we're competing. And I'm like, this isn't going anywhere. So everyone has one. But research shows time and time again in home and family life, even if a woman works or doesn't work, she tends to carry the majority of it in the home and family. Okay, so I think the easiest way to explain sort of like the in the weeds differences is I actually have a visual in the book, so I'll describe it.
Mm-hmm.
But think of a Venn diagram with 3 circles.
Mm-hmm.
So the tasks involved in the mental load have 3 different domains. The first is a physical. Stereotypically, this is where guys crush it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, make me a list, babe. Like, I'm on it. I'll do the dishes. Do you feel better? And we're like, better.
Mm-hmm.
Still overwhelmed. It's just like doing the tasks. Then there is the mental, which is making the lists or like grocery lists or work stuff. So a lot of mental. And then the third is the emotional. And this seems like the differentiator to me when I've like looked at the research and talked to men and women. And that is like the ongoing calculations that we're regularly making to try to maximize positive experiences of members in our family.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the short-term stuff where we're projecting though into the future, where we'll be like, okay, it's dinner time. Like, how do I make something everybody will eat so that I don't have, like, my son's name is Roy. So Roy doesn't go to bed, and like as soon as he gets in bed, he wants a bar or some sort of snack, you know, and make sure he gets like enough nutrition because he's like itty bitty. And like, how do I make sure I fill that kid up, right? It's like that's a short-term one. And then the long-term is like educational decisions for our kids, where we're like, oh, where should we live? Get the best school, but also they have good people around them and set them up for the, you know, we're future projecting and the stakes feel really high, even in the short-term ones. And it takes up a lot of space, a lot of energy, a lot of research, a lot of times. And so that's the one that's really hard for a couple of reasons. One, it's really hard to explain to somebody who doesn't think the same way. Second is that it follows you everywhere. So you could be like at work and be just whiplash back out of the present into this sort of emotional calculating state. And it requires a really deep knowing of members of your family. So it's hard. You can't like hire somebody really to do it unless they've been around your family a really long time. So the last piece, at the intersection of these 3 circles is what I just call the triple threat. And that's that, and most of the tasks of home and family life sort of occur there, which means that dinner is not just cooking dinner. It's thinking through what's in your pantry and in your fridge and what you need from the store, and then like always missing that one stinking ingredient and figuring that out. And then it's also that emotional piece. How do I make something everyone will eat, get enough nutrition? You know, it's one little task that seems really simple, unpacks to contain a ton of work, energy, thought, and heart from all these 3 domains. And I think that's the piece that's helpful for our partners to understand. Because a lot of times women will be like, I'm so overwhelmed. And partners will be like, tell me about it. What's going on? Like, well, I got to make dinner, permission slips, like enroll them in Little League. Da, da, da. And they're like, so? Like, that's life. Life is busy. Like, make a list, knock it out. You got this. It's not a big deal. And for us, a couple of things happen. It can feel like, shoot, I can't figure out how to explain this. Or it can feel like my partner doesn't get it. They just never will understand. Or we can start to judge ourselves. Why am I so overwhelmed? This is normal life stuff. But when we understand that each task unpacks to reveal all of this effort, it makes sense why we're often pretty overwhelmed and sort of always needing to be productive. Whew.
But the very things that are triple threats.
I'm like, yes.
Yeah, no, that was actually super helpful for me.
Thank you.
Was that good for you? Okay, good.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I found
The amount of times I get
like go around explain to husband.
the amount of times I get
super
overwhelmed at dinner and trying to explain that, I'm like, I'm thinking about them 10 years from now, and do they have a bad relationship with food because when I make them for dinner? Yeah.
Or you're like, even the thing of like, do I make them finish their food or make them eat a few more bites? Or do I like, no, you set your own boundaries. Like the whole thing is overwhelming to navigate.
And then I'll go to bed thinking about my kids talking to their therapist someday about how my mom made me finish my meal every single night. You know,
when you said everyone has a mental load, I kind of felt like a buffoon though, because I was like, comparatively, Shawn's mental load is just, I know it, she knows it, it's way larger than mine, you know? And I'm like, I don't even know if I have a mental load. I think I'm just vibing, you know? Like,
the amount of times it is comical.
Just vibing.
The amount of times we'll be sitting in silence and I'm like, what are you thinking about? And he's like, there's literally nothing. I'm like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
What do you...
No, my husband
like,
does the
what
same
words
thing.
are going through your head?
Yeah.
Like, my dialogue literally never stops.
Never ends.
Dude, but she'll say like one sentence too, and then she'll like say another sentence that's like my response to her response to my response, and it's like, I don't even know what just happened in your mind. I'm just like, I'm just smiling and waving, you know?
And like,
Anyway,
is your brain literally just like a blank white wall? Or is it not even a wall?
That's
Is
why
it
I'm
just
like,
like the abyss?
I think I should go get checked out or something.
Like
That's super common, by the way, or my husband's there too. Because I'm like, what you thinking about? And he's like, nothing. Like, how do you do that?
I think I would literally have to, in my brain, think nothing. 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 It would just have to be on repeat.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
It's impossible.
The very things that you described is almost the minefield of like the triple threat where it's like, hey, dinner, when I belittle dinner, that's a big deal for Shawn. And she feels offended because there's the mental, the physical, and the emotional part involved in that for her, which I'm sure I have my own. I'm not self-aware enough to know what those are right now. But like, I'm working
You're
on
going to try to find one.
But I also think that it's those very things that are triple threats that could lead to the most hurt that also are the most powerful and like beneficial, especially like dinner. It's like, for me, our family dinners growing up were so formational to me and like core to our family identity. So they should be paid attention to, both because they're soft spots and could cause hurt, but also because, and maybe as a result, they are the very things that like mean the most in a lot of ways, you know?
Yes.
So
that's why the stakes feel high.
Yeah.
With stuff like this.
Very.
Yeah.
I am curious though. So you mentioned the resentment that you started experiencing towards your husband. What happened next?
Then I was scared to have another child. I mean, that's the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's because it felt, and then part of it was our circumstances because of that move. And so when he went to California and I stayed in Florida because my family was close by, and I was like, I'm not gonna live in temporary housing while you're busy at work dinners. Like, I'm gonna stay here where I have support. And so I remember so we just kind of carried on. Like, honestly, it's like not the best years of our relationship. I grew up with a mom who was like this stereotypical 80s, 90s super mom. And so I just took all that and I just like placed that on myself as the expectations I carried for myself. I have a lot of stamina. So I just like put my head down and I just handled stuff. And the more I handled stuff, the less involved my husband was. And that's he carries responsibility for that too. But also I just kind of was like, I got it. I'll do it. Don't worry about it. So we went on for a while like that. And I remember when we were talking about having a second kid, we went round and round because our daughter Effie is like kind of spicy. I can't. And then we're like, but she can't be an only child. So you're like stuck in that world. And I ended up getting pregnant really fast. And then I was early with her and I was really late with our son. And I remember I had a midwife. I was talking to her and I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, you coming? Like, what's happening? And I think you're holding on to something, because she thought it was some complication with my first birth. But I think I was holding on to actually like the worry and the fear about what would happen to our marriage, because I felt so uncared for and not understood, like very misunderstood during that time. And so we had to have a sit down and we had to talk about it. We had to talk about expectations. And the second time around, we did it differently. And I think after that talk, Roy ended up coming within like the next couple days. So yeah, so we had to make adjustments, and the adjustments were personal adjustments in how I showed up this time around, and then also how we navigate it as a couple. So I talk about this in my first book, but I had to really get good at expressing what I needed. Women are notoriously horrible at this because we make our needs really small. And partially we have to. When we first have kids, you're like, I can't be a priority. But then we sort of get stuck on the back burner, and then we get to a place where we're so disassociated from ourselves, we don't even know what we need anymore. And be like, hey, you have a minute. And we're like, I don't even know what's gonna, like a drop in the bucket by that point. So I had to get good at identifying what I needed and then express it with like a healthy sense of entitlement, not like a jerk, but just like I had to get in there a little bit with my husband, and he had to adjust. I remember at one point he's like, you're different. And I was like, no, I'm just not stuffing it all down. And so like, let's figure out how I can deliver this in a way you can handle. And then we had to make adjustments as a couple where he had to step up more. I had to make more room for him. I had to change some of my expectations, and we had to get better at talking about this stuff on a regular basis.
One of the questions we have here, why is it important for both people in a relationship to speak up and be able to say what they need? I want to talk about that entitlement piece because I don't know the right balance, but I just had a lunch with a business partner a couple weeks ago. He's like, I have to tell you what I need in this. And it's like, okay, please do. But what do we do with that? Like your needs are not the freaking top of the food chain. Neither are mine. Both needs really matter, but they're not the most important thing. So how do you view that, the entitlement piece of it? You know what I'm saying?
In the relationship?
In a marriage.
I mean, everything is kind of a negotiation in a marriage, but I was at a place in my own, so I'll speak to how it operated in ours, where I feel like with my husband, Chad, he didn't have to speak up a lot for what he needed because like naturally it kind of just shook out that way. And not like, nothing wrong with him, but it's like, I remember after our daughter was born, he was on a work trip and then on the way home, he stopped and got a haircut. And I was like, are you serious? Like, we had like a 2-month-old. And I was like, must be, and I shouldn't be this upset about it, but I was like, must be nice that you didn't like rearrange the stars to get your hair done and you didn't check with me. So in some ways, like his needs just kind of got met a little bit more easily. And so I don't know. I think that there seems to be, and I know this isn't always true, but there seems to be a bit more space for like the husbands and the dads to kind of find that time. Often, this is what I think is important to keep in mind. As a woman and specifically as a mother, if our needs aren't met sometimes, like we don't have to go first. It's not going to happen all the time, but we got to take turns. Like a lot of mothers don't ever get a turn. Then we're not able to show up for our family in the ways that we really need to. When a mom is lifted up and cared for and like getting close to feeling whole, she's going to be able to better give to her kids, be patient with her kids, show up in her relationship, have more energy to give to her relationship. So sort of like the heart of the family for a lot of families is the mom. And so it's important that she finds her voice and that her needs become a priority.
I 100% agree. I find myself sometimes at my worst when I'm like, when things are tough or the kids are screaming or there's chaos and I just need a minute of silence. Or how do you differentiate needs from I would really like this and it's not possible or it's not realistic? Do you see the difference? It's like, well, that's not really a need. That's just me. I got to tighten up. I got to freaking step up to the plate. And am I thinking about this wrong? I'm being honest.
I love it. This is, keep going.
Like when do you like power through and when do you take the minute?
Yeah, it's like, what do I actually need? Maybe I need to think about that more. But like whenever I get in a place where I'll just say it from my perspective, like mentally fragile enough to say, I need this.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, I got to freaking boot up and like not view that as a need anymore. You know what I'm saying?
You say. Yeah.
You're going to start bringing up arguments that we have because we talk about this a lot. I think there is a difference in getting to that point and saying, oh, I need to boot up and I need to be better. And I think you should, in my personal opinion, please correct me if I'm completely wrong. I think a better approach is like just admitting a vulnerability and saying, I actually need more than a minute. I need your help. Like I need your support as a spouse to allow me, because of whatever it is, mental load of some kind, I need your support right now. And I actually do need, in order to be the best parent, to go sit down for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's you being a bad parent. I think that's being human. And I don't think you need to be stronger. I think that's literally why you have a teammate.
But you know those times where you're like, I need a glass of wine right now. You're like, that's not right.
I think,
like,
but I think reading into that as a spouse and saying, my spouse is saying, I need a glass of wine. I need a second. I need a piece of space. No, you don't need a glass of wine. Alcohol is not the answer. Let's say that. But like my spouse is obviously struggling with something.
Yeah.
So rather than exploiting that to them and saying, no, do better, be better. It's like, babe, it's okay. Like
I agree. And how nice to have like both people receptive to one another's needs.
Yeah.
And I think like I've noticed this in my husband is he'll try to be needless sometimes. And he'll sort of do the thing where he's just man up and you just pushes through. And then all of us are like, why is dad so grumpy? Like it comes out in other ways, you know, you're like, so I think, you know, it's hard to answer your question because everybody's different. Yeah. And so I think like a good metric is thinking about your time and your energy. And like you and Shawn can then talk about if one of you or both of you are at your wit's end, like who's got the energy to sort of push a little further and who, do you have the time to, and vice versa. But I think we have to know ourselves. We have to check in with ourselves. Like, what is it that's going on for me right now? What do I need that will help me fill up a little bit so then I can show up in a more present way for my family? And if you need the minute, ask for support. It feels good to give in our relationships. It really does. So it's like, if you come to her for support, it's probably going to feel kind of good for her to give that to you. And then she knows you'll be ready to give later on.
No, I agree. What I am just fully coming to realize in this conversation right now, live.
This is a great conversation.
It is. I'm realizing how emotionally, like, I feel like I have a pretty good emotional IQ or whatever, the EQ. But like when you say something, it's like levels to it. Like the glass of wine. It's like, okay, I got to think about what is she actually saying? You know, what does she need?
We've been together 14 years. No.
I think there's depth to it, and I take things so literally. Where it's like, oh, she needs.
He's like,
you don't
she's
need
an
to
alcoholic.
sit down. Like you don't need to sit down. You're fine standing.
This
you know
is literally how we. Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of self-reflection as a result of this, so I'm glad.
And kind of like even the other day, Mr. Grumpy Pants is walking around, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And he's like, "Nothing." And I'm like, "Obviously something." Well, now it is because you put me on the spot. I'm like, "No, there is something, but like it's fine to say it. It's not making you a weaker human being.
Yeah,
it's literally just helping me support you."
Yeah. Sometimes I used to have a term for it. I used to talk about my husband. I can't think of it right now, but it's basically like having like insight in retrospect, where it's like you're grumpy and she's like, "What's going on?" You're like, "Nothing," and then you're like, I'm fine," and then later on you might be like, "Oh, well, this happened today," and I'm kind. It's like the insight comes. It's delayed onset insight. That's
literally.
So you might just need to like slow down and check in with yourself and figure out what is it that I need. But I think, you know, overall, people, men and women, can be pretty bad at expressing what we need. We tend to focus on women, but men are pretty bad at it too. So we have to get better at this. And I think, like, if I were to give a quick sort of tip for how to get in touch with what you need, one of the quickest ways to get there is to think about what you complain about the most. So our complaints are windows into our unmet needs. And if we're like walking, I don't know, I do this, I don't know, but if you like, I'll walk around the house muttering under my breath when I'm like at my limit. So if you like analyzed your mutterings, it would reveal probably a need that you have that's not getting met. And then I think the other piece is that when we express a need, it's helpful to accompany it with a clear deliverable. Sometimes in our relationships, I see this across the board with relationship stuff, we'll just complain about something, which is a need a lot of times, like masked with a complaint. And but we'll be vague. Like for years, I would say to my husband, like, I just need more romance. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, why doesn't anything change? It's like, well, that's vague. You know, what does that mean, more romance? What does that mean to me? He doesn't understand that. He sent flowers once and then nothing happened again. And I'm like, I don't understand. And what happens a lot of times then is that, like, for example, in our own relationship, I'd be like, that's not what I wanted. And he's like, oh, you need so much. What's like, you're so complicated. I'm just not like that. I don't need that. And like the little things then suddenly become big things pretty quickly in our relationship. So if we're clear with the outcome we want to see in the deliverable, it can save us.
We talk a lot about goals and like vision. And I think that kind of plays into that, where it's like actually a really fun process to go on that adventure together of like, hey, flowers, do an experiment of like try a bunch of different things and see what makes you feel romance or whatever. It's like, hey, flowers actually didn't make me feel like I was romanced, or holding hands really did, and it's like, I don't know. I probably like write too much stuff down. I'm probably too analytical like that, but it's like, okay, Shawn like that, and she likes the holding hands. That's great. That did work. Check.
This
and
is literally what you do.
No, but that's so nice.
But it's like,
I think people probably wish their husbands would do more of that. Like be intentional about it. That's nice.
But it really is an adventure, and it's like a game of like, we're both finding that out, and I'm learning about her, and she's learning about her, and I'm learning about me and she's learning about me. I'm curious, the tagline, less resentment and great sex. So as promised at the beginning of the episode, actually just define what great sex is. How about we start there?
I've never had to do that. That's a good question. I think great sex is subjective to the couple that's defining it. So great sex is where both people are like relatively happy with the frequency of sex. Usually there's always one who wants a little bit more and one who like wants less, or they're good with where they're at. So they're both relatively happy with it, and it's a mutually fulfilling sex life. Both people get enjoyment out of it. It enhances the relationship by bringing them closer, and there's a sense of openness. I'm just winging it on great sex right now, but I think those are some of the key components.
What would be, to follow up that question, the biggest mistake you see couples make, like within their sex life?
I think one is they don't talk about it, which is like really funny that we'll like get naked. We're like, this is too awkward to talk about it. You're like, okay, that makes absolutely no sense. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think the other is that we have to remember that, so I talk in the book about 2 core desires everybody has in their relationship: to feel loved and to feel secure. And you can unpack those in different ways. But the way that we arrive at those feelings are very different. So broad strokes, stereotypically for a lot of men to feel safe and loved in a relationship, you got to have a healthy sex life. You got to have a fulfilling sex life. That sort of like lets them know, oh, I'm desired, I'm wanted, I'm safe in my relationship. And I think for women, broad strokes again, for a lot of us, we want to feel connected. When we feel safe and loved, then we feel better entering into our sex life. And I think there's just like, we just miss each other on this. It feels just like the game is rigged a little bit. We're like, why can't we just be the same on this one? And so sometimes I think one partner will minimize the importance of what's going on in the bedroom, and the other partner will minimize the importance of what's going on outside the bedroom. And so we miss each other, but we need to, again, it's that stepping toward with humility and understanding can make a big, big difference. And I think, something throughout the book I try to do is provide a lot of explanations and understanding of dynamics that can easily become very personalized. And then when they're personalized, we get offended and we think just our partner doesn't care about us. But there's some sort of like universal differences that really impact our relationships. I think this is one of them. Yeah. How do you feel connected?
What's interesting about sex with the differences you just described is like, what a magical alchemy of like, okay, because all of these outside the bedroom type things you described earlier and the connectedness that does come with sex, but then the sex that is desired by one party maybe more than the other, like the physical part of it, it's like this there's a lot that goes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're just realizing this.
I don't think they do sorry. I don't think, like my husband too. I remember once I was like, did you realize? He's like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're very complex.
This has been a great conversation.
You had another question.
Oh, closing question.
Okay.
What, if you were to come up with one, what's a challenge for couples listening that they could take away from this or try this week to hopefully like help their connection? Not just with sex, like just within their relationship.
Okay, I have 2. Can I give 2?
Please.
Okay. I do experiments in my relationship without telling my husband. I keep waiting. I'm like saying it more and more where I'm like, I'm going to see if he listens to any podcast I've ever done.
Yeah. That's amazing.
But I've been doing them for years. He never knows. And then I just watch and I see if anything changes in the relationship. And it's wild how much you can change as an individual in the dynamic of your relationship. So one of the ones I did several years ago is he'd always accuse me of being too sensitive. And I'm not like easily offended. It's actually really hard to offend me. But I'm just like a sensitive person in that like I pick up on stuff. So I was always like, are you okay with me? Are you okay with me? I was always like doing this temperature checking.
That's me.
Yeah.
It drives him crazy.
You're probably a highly sensitive person.
Very.
Yeah. So have you read that book? Because you should read that book.
Okay, I'll read
it's
it.
Literally the highly sensitive person.
Great.
Okay, so read that. And then you'll be like, oh my gosh, my life makes sense. So anyway, I would always be temperature checking and I would annoy him. And it would actually start fights sometimes. Because then he'd be like, I'm fine. And now I'm not fine because you're bugging me about this.
That
I'm
happened
like,
45 minutes ago.
Literally right before you walked in.
Yeah.
I was like, what's wrong?
It's a thing. It happens a lot. So I did this experiment where I just started taking 0 things personally, nothing personally. And I did it for 30 days.
Okay.
And so if I felt his mood, I was like, and I would not engage. I would not temperature check. I would not respond. And it made the biggest difference in our relationship. Okay. And he would shift if I picked up on a mood, and I was usually right because like he has that delayed onset insight.
Oh, yeah.
So I would kind of know, but I just let it go, and he would shift out of it faster. And it never created that tension between us. It's like kind of amazing. So that's one thing. The second thing is where I started, is just to increase gratitude in your relationship. And in the book, I give a formula for a really good compliment. And so I think couples should do this at least once a day for each other. And the formula is observation of either a personal quality or something that they do, plus how it makes your life better. If couples did this every single day, I think it would completely shift their relationship. So I'll give you an example. It might be, I see how hard you work to put a good dinner on the table for our family. I cannot tell you how much that relieves any worry that I have that our kids are going to be like well fed and taken care of. And I appreciate all of the heart and thought you put in. That would feel so good. We get once a day. Both people do it to each other.
Wow. I have one more question, because you mentioned you didn't feel supported. Were you not supported by your husband in those early years, or did you just not feel supported, or does the difference even matter? Does trying to differentiate those two even matter?
I feel like in some ways he was very passive. I find this a lot with like partnerships after kids. Is usually a lot of times women will have partners who are willing, but they're passively willing to do things. So they're like waiting, like, what's my orders? I always joke my husband's like Emmett from the Lego movie because he just wants a set of instructions.
Yeah.
I think in one hand, he wasn't stepping up enough. Yeah. And so that had to shift. And he had to sort of just like know he had permission to get it wrong. And I was okay with that. And I really needed him to show up in some different ways. And I think, and I do think, yes, he did support me. Of course. Like he wasn't absent, but maybe the support was different than what I needed at the time. I don't remember the last part of your question.
No, I think that answered it.
That answer?
That was really good. Well, compliment for you of gratitude. I know you've spent a lot of time writing this book, and it's based off of a lifetime of devotion to this subject. So thank you for coming, blessing us with your wisdom. And this was a really good conversation.
I think you changed our relationship.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Really
I love
good.
what you guys do.
So for those listening that want to learn more about Dr. Cutlip, we'll link your information down below, as well as the link to your new book, A Better Share.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.